You are listening to a special edition PTBN Comics PopBlast, Titans on DC Universe series premiere.
PTBN Nation Comics, welcome to another special PopBlast quick review right here on the PTBN Nation Comics Network. I am your host, Russell Sellers, and joining me for this special PopBlast review is one half of the Hard Traveling Fanboys, Mr. Greg Phillips. How are you doing tonight, Greg?
I am doing fantastically well, Russell. It is the weekend. It's the freaking weekend, and I'm ready to have me some fun.
Well, hopefully we're going to have some fun talking on this little PopBlast right now because we're going to be talking about the highly anticipated first episode of the DC Universe original live-action series, Titans, which just dropped on this past Friday and will be continuing to drop on every Friday for the next, I guess it'll be 10 weeks now. It's an 11-episode first season. This first episode, titled Titans, was directed by Brad Anderson, who, as you may know that name, he also directed the Christian Bale film, The Machinist, as well as several episodes of different popular TV shows, such as The Man in the High Castle, Person of Interest, Boardwalk Empire, Fringe, and The Wire, just to name a few. The first episode written by Greg Berlanti, Jeff Johns, and Akiva Goldsman. So, I guess we just jump right into this. Greg, I watched the episode this morning. I know you just watched it a few minutes ago. First impression?
Pleasantly surprised.
Yeah?
Not as, full disclosure here, anybody that's listened to the Hard Traveling Fanboys has heard us and our dread for this show, because I thought the trailers were completely tone deaf, nothing that I really wanted to see, and unfortunately nothing that a lot of people wanted to see from the Titans. I know several people that have said that they're no longer interested in getting the app for now, because that's the main selling point is the original content, and they thought the trailers for Titans looked abysmal. I agree with that, but having watched the show, I would have to say that it's a amazing case of the show being so completely better than the trailers and the teasers that were put out for it. That's not to say that I think it was great, because I didn't think it was great, but I thought it was pretty good, and certainly as first episodes go, better than several that I've seen for comic book shows. So I have to say, Russell, definitely a pleasant surprise to watch this one.
I'd have to agree with most of that. My expectations were on the floor going in because I was like a lot of you. I didn't really care for that first trailer. I thought that it was pretty much the definition of the grimdark DCEU that everyone loves to criticize so much. And so, setting your bar on the floor like that makes it pretty easy to clear. But I was surprised that I actually wound up really enjoying myself. I mean, it's definitely dark and gritty in a way that's going to frustrate a lot of, say, anti-Snyder DCEU fans. But at least in this context, I kind of felt like the darkness was justifiable. But they set themselves up in a way that allows them to tell this type of story with this type of tone, and it still actually feels like they're being true to these characters in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So, and before we go any further, I should just go ahead and warn everybody, this is a spoiler-filled review, so if you're worried about spoilers, you should go no further. But with that said, you've been warned. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Thoughts on, I know that you are the biggest Dick Grayson fan walking the planet. At least as far as my knowledge is concerned. That's how it is in my headcanon.
He's my dude. He's my one.
That's what I'm talking about. Like, he is your guy. I mean, if any superhero out there is going to be like the one that you're going to have a very protective sense about, it's going to be Dick Grayson, Robin, Nightwing. In this series, he is Robin still in this first episode. Played by actor Brenton Thwaites, who hasn't really done a lot, but people might recognize him from one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. If you guys actually watched that series, I stopped after the third one. But so I knew virtually nothing of him coming into the series. I want to get your opinion first. What did you think of him as Dick Grayson?
I thought he was great. I'll be honest with you. I thought he was we'll get to the other performance in a little bit that I thought was really good, but I thought he was great, and I thought he was probably my favorite part of the show because, to your point, Russell, Dick Grayson, Nightwing, Robin, is my favorite comic book character, and has been since I was a kid. And I don't even know why, because I haven't even enjoyed that many of his comic book runs. But something about the idea of the legacy, the idea of a character that could kind of bridge that happy medium gap between Spider-Man and Batman in terms of his personality and demeanor. So just the idea of Dick Grayson as almost taking the groundwork that Bruce Wayne lays and perfecting it and improving upon it. It has always appealed to me. And so I was really nervous about this because I was afraid it was going to go so grimdark that we were going to get a Dick Grayson that was a murderer, that we were going to get a Dick Grayson that shot guys with guns and killed them, and that would not have sat right with me necessarily. But I was really happy with this version of Dick because I know there is a contingent of people out there that want Dick Grayson to be happy-go-lucky at all times, that want him to be constantly cracking wise. And while cracking wise is a big part of his character, I don't necessarily think he has to be defined by that at all times. And some of my favorite Nightwing stories, in fact, are the darkest Nightwing stories, the ones that put him in a world filled with despair and agony, gloom, doom, and suffering, and somehow he still manages to be that beacon of light. And I think certainly when we pick him up in this series, he is not a beacon of light. He is somebody who is disillusioned and jaded, and yet still finds the way to be a beacon of light for a girl that's in need of help. And I thought the presentation of here was great. His performance, I thought, was really good. Like he's instantly my favorite on-screen Dick Grayson. We've only had one or two before this, and no disrespect to Burt Ward, who played his version of the character perfectly. But neither Burt Ward nor Chris O'Donnell were able to really capture the feel of Dick Grayson the way that this guy already has in his first appearance. I'm already like, okay, I recognize him. That's Dick Grayson. I can get with this. I also thought he did a damn fine job in the action scenes. I thought there's some aspects that we'll probably get to in a little bit that maybe were a little over the top. I can see some complaints about that. But I think overall he's violent for a reason. This is the place where he's at in his life right now. Mm-hmm. And it's telling a story that, by the way, we have seen told in the comics. Yes. About Dick Grayson being angry with Batman and that anger seeping through into his vigilante life. And I think part of the story of the show is going to be that kind of tapering off.
He actually addresses that in the show. There's a scene with he and his partner, or his new partner in the Detroit Police Department, because as we should mention, this show takes place largely in Detroit, Michigan, at least as far as this first episode is concerned. Mm-hmm. And he gives his new partner a lot of attitude to begin with, or basically just says, I don't want a partner. I don't want to deal with anything. I want to work alone. Hey, you seem like a good cop. He didn't run her down or be a real jerk to her or anything. He just didn't want to talk to her. He was like, you're a good cop. You go do your thing. I'm going to go do mine, and we're good. But then she finally kind of gets him to open up towards the end of the episode, and probably what was might be my favorite scene of the episode, when he talks about his former partner, because as everybody else thinks, he's transferred from Gotham PD to Detroit PD. And as he's talking about his kind of reverence for his old partner being Batman, it kind of seems like he lets that guard down. He starts to drop the facade that he's been holding up, and we start to see that more classic Dick Grayson coming through. That that one who still has the hope and optimism that we know the character for, but as well as the character who has a level of empathy that it kind of seems like he was saying that maybe Batman was losing, that Batman was dark and violent, and we saw that in the first action scene, as you alluded to, when Robin takes on a whole bunch of thugs all at once and really delivers a heavy beatdown to these guys. Like it's brutal. Fortunately for Robin fans, he doesn't actually kill anybody in the scene, as the trailer kind of made you think he did.
The trailer made it look like he was gunning guys down, but in fact, that's not it at all. He's emptying clips and he's taking guys out, and it was a really good scene, by the way. I was very impressed with the choreography there. Like that was one of those Arrow season 1 kind of like brutal fight scenes. I really enjoyed it.
It was hyper violent, and he certainly brutalizes his main target. He gets the worst of it, getting his face drugged through broken glass and then thrown on the ground and summarily beaten some more, which is
that's the one part. Yeah, that's the one part where you look at it and you think that, you know, Dick can. It almost adds new context to the famous "fuck Batman" line.
I was going to bring that up. The now infamous "fuck Batman" line that still felt a little odd.
Yes, 100%. To the point where I was with the person I was watching it with, we were both thinking that maybe they were going to lose that scene entirely, and they didn't. They kept it, and it is. I agree with you, a little bit forced. But I think in this context, there's almost a moment where Dick's just stomping this guy, and it almost looks like he's going to stomp him to death. And then he stops and he walks off and he pauses and he looks back at him, and he says, "Fuck Batman." So it almost adds a context of maybe he's saying "fuck Batman" for making me like that, you know? That's almost like he's aghast at what he's done.
That is exactly how it felt to me. It felt like he's angry, and like he's very angry at himself. He's angry at Batman. He's angry at this dude that he's just like really beaten within an inch of his life. And then, of course, we get a scene a little bit later, a couple of scenes later, where apparently all of this was captured on security cameras. And you actually hear a quote from the Detroit mayor saying that he views Robin as I'm paraphrasing, a demented sociopath or a violent sociopath. And whenever he hears that quote, when Dick hears that quote, you can tell that it kind of twinges him a little bit. I've watched the episode a couple of times, and I really watched his facial expression that time, and it kind of stuck him. I think that really hurt hearing that. So that, to me, says that he's on this particular type of hero's journey, and he's going to evolve as this season progresses. But, of course, we have to talk about the main crux of the episode, the character that this episode actually really revolves around, and the character that's going to be the linchpin of the series going forward, and that is Rachel, a.k.a. Raven, played by Tegan Croft. She is portrayed as a 13-year-old runaway in this first episode after her mother is killed by someone who is credited in the cast as the Acolyte. We don't really know much about him other than he claims this woman was not Rachel's mother, that he knows what's going on with her, that Rachel is not her real name, and we've already seen, especially in the opening scene of the show, a nightmare that turns into a kind of tease of demonic possession, and that seems to be where she's at this point in the show. But she doesn't know anything about what's going on, but clearly those of us who are DC Comics fans and Teen Titans fans will know that this is a clear tease to Trigon, to the famous introductory story of that character written by Marv Wolfman and drawn by George Perez. So I thought that as the episode went along, she got better and better and better, and I was like very convinced by her performance. And it was very earnest, and I actually felt like very afraid for her at several points in the series, and even afraid for the people around her. But what was your impression of her, Greg?
Yeah, that was going to be the other performance I wanted to talk about from this episode. I thought Raven, as played by Tegan Croft, is her name, correct?
Yeah, yes.
I thought she was spectacular. She was really, really good. She added an element that I kind of wasn't expecting for a young actress. I don't know if she qualified as a child actress, but a teen actress certainly. And she really conveyed a vulnerability that was necessary, because the crux of this episode is you have to feel sorry for her. You have to feel sympathy for this girl and what she's going through. And she did a great job of capturing that. I thought she and the actor playing Dick Grayson were both standouts here. And Raven in general, this is kind of a different take on Raven than I'm used to, where I usually read her where she's already got her powers, she already knows who she is and everything. So this was a little bit different for me, but it really worked. And it made sense why she would, the coincidences, of course, that have to set up her meeting Dick Grayson. It made sense why she would end up at that police station. It made sense why she would grow to trust Dick over the course of this episode. And I thought her powers were the best special effects in the episode. Absolutely. By far. It was, all the stuff with her looked great. And so I'm a big fan of Raven so far. And if this show is, at least in the early going to primarily be the Dick Grayson and Raven show, then it's off to a good start in that regard.
I would agree with that. I felt like she was excellent. The effects around her, and we're going to talk a bit about some more effects here in just a second, but I thought the effects that they built around her looked really good. A lot of it was kind of practical looking too, not like necessarily heavy CGI, though there is some of that to her performance. And one part of her performance that may make some people cringe is that she actually does kill one person in the series, or the demon inside her kills one person in a really gruesome way. So, I mean, we do see her mother executed by through a bullet to the head pretty early on, and they don't shy away from showing you like that whole. The full realization of what it's like watching someone be shot in the head. So this show is not going to shy away from being graphic. It is definitely a mature viewers show. So
yeah, and I think you have to kind of come to terms with that, because certainly this is not a Titans that you would want to show your kids.
No,
this is a Titans for an adult audience for sure. But as somebody that grew up on much more violent movies than what we'll see in Titans, I would imagine, to me, it doesn't really make that big of a difference so long as it's not gratuitous and not there for no purpose. And I thought in the case of the Raven scene, it was not where she killed the guy. It was not without purpose. It was intentional to make you see how demonic and potentially evil this entity within her can be. I did think the shooting of the mother maybe was it shocked me a little bit when I saw it. I wasn't expecting it to be quite so bold, but again, it takes a lot to offend me in terms of violence. So I'm pretty well comfortable with most of what we saw here. I do think that maybe there were a few times they could have been a little bit more tasteful in how they portrayed certain scenes. But the Raven scene that you're referring to in particular, where she kills the guy, as gross as it was, to me, it actually made sense for her, and it wasn't.
It wasn't really her to me.
It was the entity, right?
Yeah, it was. I would fully believe Trigon would kill someone in very much this manner, maybe even
100%
in more brutal ways than that. So for him, it was toned down.
But it adds into her internal conflict, because now she sees what she's capable of, or what this thing is capable of that she's battling with constantly. And yeah, really big fan of that.
Now let's get to a character that maybe you're not as big a fan of, one that I'm still kind of on the fence with because I don't know enough about her, and that was the first appearance of Corey Anders, a.k.a. Starfire, as played by Anna Diop, I think is how we pronounce her last name.
I think so.
Her story takes place really far away from everyone else, as we pick her up in Austria. And this version of Starfire has no memory of who or what she is. She wakes up after a what appears to be a car accident, and the driver of this vehicle next to her is dead. She doesn't know anything about how she got here, but she's dressed in what looks to be very expensive fur coat and dress. So she seems to be someone of means and wealth. And next thing you know, there's a car speeding towards her with dudes leaning out the windows shooting at her. So she has to, run quickly away from all this, not knowing anything about what's going on. She has a passport and ID and stuff like that in the purse that she's got with her, but she doesn't recognize the face or the name. She just winds up going back to the hotel where she had a key card from, and she starts to try to fill in the blanks from there. We do see some demonstrations of her abilities as she discovers her abilities right alongside us, of super strength, and then eventually her flame abilities that come out pretty clearly by accident. So this version of Starfire is not one that I've ever seen or one that I'm necessarily familiar with. She does not have a problem killing people, if it so suits her. So what'd you make of this, Greg?
Yeah, kind of like you. It is a way different version of Starfire than I've ever encountered. I mean, to this point, now who knows where that's all going to go, but to this point, there's no indication that she's an alien. Yet she does have powers, clearly, but there's no, Corey Anders is a nice, homage to her comic book name of Coriander, the princess. But I do wonder if that, there's a natural fear that, like, from older comic book adaptations, like the Fox X-Men movies and things like that, that it might end up just being an homage that doesn't really pay off. But it's this version of Corey seems to be as best I would describe it, Jason Bourne kind of inspired character, where
that's a good,
that's
an apt description of her.
She has no memory of what she is, who she is, or what her past is, but she has the muscle memory of this trained assassin, because she's a badass. Let's face it.
Very much so. Like I thought she was very capable in the one fight scene that she's in. I was kind of taken aback, like, whoa, this chick can go. Okay, so this is pretty badass, and it was a little off-putting to me when she snaps the dude's neck, but at the same time, I was like, well, she doesn't know who she is, and all of these people have been trying to kill her since she came to. So this is the only world that she knows.
Yes, and I think that, like, I haven't read enough of Starfire, to be quite honest with you, in the comics to be 100% certain how she feels about killing, or if that's even a hang-up for her. I will say the one theme that kind of, like, that I wasn't sure about with her was she ends up meeting Konstantin Kovar, not played by Dolph Lundgren as he was in Arrow, a version of Konstantin Kovar, and ends up incinerating him and his crew as they try to attack her. And what gets me is when she's walking by his charred corpse and she kind of like smiles and then walks off as his charred corpse collapses. That kind of, I was like, man, this girl not just doesn't have a problem with killing, but seems to actively take joy in it. So
yeah, that was the part that was a little off-putting to me as well. I dug that the powers came out accidentally, like it was like she couldn't control it.
Yes.
It was a reflex to them attempting to kill her. So that part all works for me, and I'm very curious to see what happens when she finally meets up with Raven, because apparently Corey has been looking for her, has been looking for this Rachel, because there's a picture of her in Kovar's office that she picks up and gets the name off the back of and says, oh, well, I'm, according to these people whom I've just murdered, I was actively looking for this girl. So that's the next piece of the puzzle to figuring out who I am and what is actually going on.
And while we're on the subject, the regardless of whatever issues we may have with the characterization, which will be determined in future episodes,
Yep.
I'm sure, I did think from a directing standpoint and from an action standpoint, the quote-unquote Jason Bourne scenes with her were really well done. Like, I was like, this wouldn't be out of place in Jason Bourne or John Wick or something like that. A really cool, fight scenes, and just the sense of build-up was great. Where she's in the hotel room, she doesn't know what room is hers.
Yeah.
She goes in, she finds this guy tied up in the closet, has no idea who the hell he is, what relation he has to her. The whole thing was really well done from that standpoint, just from a purely, filmmaking standpoint.
Yeah, it all builds the mystery very well around her, and it feels like the audience is really being allowed to discover these things right along with her, especially people who might not be as familiar with Starfire. All of this is just, really out there, but if you're on board with, stuff like that happening and things just being like really crazy and out there, then this is an aspect of the show that I think is going to be for you. And surprisingly, I kind of find her charming in a lot of ways. Through her performance, I was kind of gravitating to the character a little bit. There's a lot, still left to discover, but I liked what I got out of her to this point.
And her acting was good. I'll say that as well. Her acting was fine.
Acting is right on. Like, she's actually better than some of our other favorites over on the CW shows. At least right out the gate. Which I can say for pretty much all of the cast, with the exception of the lady who played Rachel's mother for a very brief moment. I wasn't quite as high on her in her first scene. But she's not going to be in the show anymore, so what does it matter? But now we get to kind of the ending setup of this, where Dick has realized that there's a conspiracy around Rachel, that there are people trying to get to her. This acolyte who wanted to kill her to apparently keep Trigon from coming in, and there may be people looking to get her so that they can help Trigon come through. But all Dick Grayson knows is that this girl's in trouble, and she needs my protection because there are people who are after her. And he's taking her somewhere. Supposedly, it's going to be somewhere safe. But the final scene is one that I feel like we definitely can't go without talking about. Because we get our first look at Ryan Potter as Gar, a.k.a. Beast Boy, as he has transformed himself into a tiger to sneak into a video game shop in Ohio, just outside Cleveland, and gets found by a security guard while in tiger form, which freaks out, I think, both of them, honestly. And he winds up running away into the woods, and we get our first look at a Beast Boy transformation, which is probably, honestly, the low point of the effects in the show.
Yeah, totally. I was about to say, that was not. As David pointed out, he's like, boy, they didn't exactly get the Shiva effects from The Walking Dead for that tiger, but.
No, and just like I tend to say about a lot of our CW shows, if you're going to attempt stuff like this, make sure you actually have the budget to do it.
Right,
and
it wasn't quite Captain Nazi.
No, it wasn't.
But it was pretty bad.
Yeah, to put it in context, it was not as bad as the lowest of low points that we've seen over on Legends of Tomorrow or on Supergirl. Which still have by far the worst CGI creatures of any show, maybe. But I do say that as a first attempt, it was slightly better than I expected it to be, but it was still not good.
It was with what you're doing with this show, especially. And I will say this, it's more egregious than something to me. It stands out, not more egregious, but it stands out more to me than something like Captain Nazi or, which I thought Flash did a good job with Gorilla Grodd on their effects. That's one thing that they've usually generally done. Supergirl with Parasite was really bad, and it stood out like a sore thumb too. But like, what made it stand out is this is a show that is so serious and is so, quote, gritty and realistic or whatever, that when you have bad CGI, it's going to stick out more than it would if it was in a show that kind of embraces how cheesy it is, you know?
Yeah. And it's possible that we'll get an embracing of the cheese now that Gar is part of this, because I just don't see how you do a dark and gritty version of Beast Boy. And I don't think it's going to go there, because we've already seen little bits of his performance in other trailers. He's totally not a dark and gritty version of Beast Boy. He's going to be the comic relief of the show. And okay, if we only see his transformations here and there, I think it'll be okay. Hopefully it improves as the show goes along and they learn how to do this a little bit more. But overall, if we were to rate this one, say out of 5, where are you sitting on it?
I am sitting at. I'll give it a 3. 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5 is not bad. I think I'm just slightly higher at a 3.5 out of 5. Solid debut. Better than some comic book show debuts that we've seen, and certainly since we were all expecting a massive train wreck, what a pleasant surprise Titans turned out to be. So
100%, Russell. It was a, it didn't hit a grand slam, but it hit a solid single. Yeah. And that's more than a lot of shows do that strike out, whether it be Iron Fist, which of course struck out in its first episode.
And its entire first season.
Entire first season. We've seen it with countless shows. Even shows, I don't know that I liked it quite as much as I liked the Arrow pilot when it came out, but certainly Arrow had its struggles out of the gate for the first. It took it a while to find its footing. And one thing that I was going to say is, as a prediction, I guess, it feels like pretty obvious to me that this whole first season is going to be set up for what comes in season 2. It feels to me like this is going to be a season of introductions, relationship forming, and then I would actually be surprised if we don't see a Nightwing-led Titans in season 2.
That's where I think all this is going as well. Maybe Nightwing. I say that tepidly, like I don't know if they necessarily go there, but certainly I don't think we get a fully formed Titans team until probably either episode 10 or 11 of this season. This is going to be a slow burn show that gradually builds up the characters before putting them all together as like a big team. But we're going to see their individual stories playing out, and the characters slowly moving towards each other until they're all together, and we get maybe a more recognizable Titans team. And also, I think that if anything I'm going to predict for Season 2 is I think that Season 2 may actually wind up being a bit lighter, a little more lighthearted than Season 1.
Yes, I agree.
Mostly because right now everybody is separate and they're all dealing with their own stuff. And it's heavy. There's a lot of heaviness in there. But when they come together, the idea of Titans is that it's a family, that they come together to support each other, to help build each other up. And
they fill in gaps.
Yeah, they're filling in the gaps. But if they're going to do that, then I think you've got a really good chemistry between Dick Grayson and Raven right now. Mm-hmm. And the real secret or the real trick will be to get that same level of chemistry between each of the rest of the members of the cast. Now, one thing I did want to ask you about is this is different than a lot of other shows that come out on streaming services, because this show was not released all at once. It's being released one episode at a time over the course of 11 weeks. How are you feeling about that as a general practice for DCU?
Hate it, to be honest with you. I feel like it's outdated in 2018. I think that if you're trying to mimic Netflix as one of your, on the one hand, they say they want to be like Netflix and do a rotational and curated model to their content. But on the other hand, if you're going to do that, then do like Netflix and upload it. And I feel like the way that people consume content today is so much different than it's ever been before. And while I'm in for I've already paid for the year's subscription, so I'm in regardless, whether I want to watch it all at once or wait. But a lot of people out there haven't committed yet. And a lot of people out there are only paying month to month. So, for those people, I feel like you need to give them a little bit. And I understand if you give it all up front and they could pay for 1 month and then abandon the service. But in that case, my answer to that would be upload more content and maybe don't take the Batman movies down without telling anybody about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a backfire to this too, because you could have people waiting until the whole series is available for them to binge all at once. They pay for a single month and then they still abandon you, and you've only made that same amount of money either way.
That's a great point, Russell. I had forgotten about that, but somebody actually told me that at work, that said that they were interested in seeing this show. And I said, they said, so when does the season upload? And I said, no, they're not doing the entire season. It's not going to be all up until December or something like that. And he said, well, I guess I'll just wait till December to get the service then.
Exactly that.
So that's already happening.
They will wait. Now, supposedly they're not going to necessarily do that with Young Justice whenever that starts up. Like, it's not all going to be at once, because it's supposed to be, I think, 26 episodes in the season, but 2 segments of 13 episodes uploaded. So at least something will be bingeable immediately on the DC Universe app. But I'm going to close this out by saying that I'm pleasantly surprised by this first episode, and hopefully over the coming weeks, at least in the next 11 weeks, we'll pop in periodically to review other episodes of the series, or review of the series up to that point. Maybe not every week, but certainly there will be more Titans talk going forward.
Absolutely. And it would be good to get the thoughts of longtime Titans fans, like Todd Weber, for instance.
Yes, absolutely. Todd is someone that I am very anxious to hear his full thoughts on this series as it goes forward, as it builds up. And we don't get a preview of next week's episode, which is a little disappointing. I was hoping for a trailer for it, but we know that next week's episode is titled Hawk and Dove, as we're going to be introduced to this universe's version of the breastular characters, as I just mentioned.
Kind of serendipitous timing of a Hawk and Dove show, wouldn't you say, Russell?
I would indeed. That is going to come out next week, as you and I are gearing up to talk about a Hawk-related bit of media. As you are going to be my next guest on DC Post-Crisis Management, as I'm going to come and visit the Hard Traveling Fanboy compound to lay on the Hard Traveling couch and discuss all the issues with 0 Hour Crisis in Time.
Yes, because we have to figure out, is he Hawk, is he Monarch, or is he extant, for God's sake?
And I can't uncross my eyes, but we're going to get to that. I don't want to give away too much, folks. You got to come back for that episode. But is there a lot to discuss in that one. But anyway, we thank you guys for joining us for this wonderful PopBlast review of Titans Episode 1, titled Titans, on the DC Universe streaming app, and you'll be able to catch new episodes of Titans for the next 10 weeks every Friday. Starting at midnight. The episodes will be up for the rest of this season. So, and we presume that they're not going to just take this down, given that it is their original content. But we've already seen what happens whenever you assume things about DCU. But with that said, you can find me on Twitter at Russell_Sellers, and you can follow the Place to Be Nation Comics Twitter at PTBN Comics. Join the Facebook comics group, Place to Be Nation Comics. Search for it, find it, join it. We're in there. We're going to talk comics with you. And of course, as I alluded to, listen to my other show, DC Post Crisis Management. First episode with the aforementioned manager extraordinaire Todd Weber is up now. That's on Crisis on Infinite Earths next episode with this guy over here, talking about 0 Hour Crisis in Time. And Greg, tell the folks what's going on with you.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at gphillips8652. Don't ask about the convoluted numbers. It's a simple but yet complex story. The PTBN Comics Facebook page is another good place to find me. I'm always hanging around there, commenting where it's not warranted. And also every week here at PlayStation Pop, the Hard Traveling Fanboys, we are in the midst of Walking Dead month. We just did our review of the Season 9 premiere, so check that out. Also, Jennifer Smith joined us for a look at the top 5 episodes of the show. And we are gearing up for a loaded November that will include the next portion of the biennial Place to Be Nation Comics Draft. So be on the lookout for that.
Well, lots of good stuff coming up, and be sure to stay tuned for more PopBlast, just like this one, that are going to become a little bit more of a regular thing for the comics contingent. So with that said, we will see you all next time.